Israel's quite good. Okay, now I'll got a few hours. So to try and deal with everything, I'm not sure I can. But to try and deal with some of the things, I will. I'm going to try and move quickly. If somebody wants me to repeat something, happy to do so. Thank you all for coming. Is everyone still awake? Looking around? You look like you're sleeping. Not yet. Give me 5 minutes, then I promise you'll get to sleep. Okay, a couple of things. Number one, a destabilising force. Well, every country can be considered a destabilising force in the Middle East because every country is in the Middle East and at war. I want to show that Israel is a reactive force to all the destabilizers. That's number one. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of issues first before I go into my longer speech. Let's talk about, number one, the nuclear arms. Let's start off with that. Israel is very strong in deterrent of nuclear arms. It took out the Iraq nuclear capabilities, it took out the Syrian nuclear capabilities, and the world at the time condemned Israel, and today thanks Israel. Israel has got nuclear weapons since the 1960s because across the Middle East, hundreds of millions of Arabs made it very clear that Israel needs to be wiped off the map, and therefore Israel has no nuclear weapons. Every single war that Israel has been in has been a defensive war. Israel has not gone out to attack or conquer land. Any land that it has taken has been through defensive wars. Let's just start off with that. Secondly, the United Nations. All the United Nations. All the United Nations resolutions against Israel, many resolutions against Israel, disproportionate. I'm going to use this word disproportionate because it's leveled against Israel time and time again. Disproportionate against Israel, all these resolutions. And if you look at the numbers, they will show you the disproportionate amount of resolutions against Israel as opposed to the rest of the world. I want to ask a question. How many UN resolutions have there been against Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinians? I can tell you now, it's disproportionate. It's disproportionate against the amount of resolutions against Israel, which is why Israel takes the UN with a punch of salt. Okay. Let's move on to, let's talk about Hebron. Somebody mentioned about the Hebron community, planting communities. The Hebron Jewish community was there before the state of Israel and has been there for many decades. It's not been planted in there. Let's talk a little bit about Gaza quickly. Gaza.
Keep talking about untruth.
Order.
Stop making up your own truth.
Order.
Gaza. We remind you that Gaza was taken. Gaza was. I'm going to come back to Gaza during the speech. Let me talk a little bit about this. First of all, disproportion. Now, the term disproportion means you have to compare like for like. You have to look at two scenarios which are similar, and you have to say that one is much greater than the other. That's proportionate. And I'm going to show how disproportionate is when it comes to Israel. Let's look at, for example, the terms genocide and war crimes that are leveled against Israel. Let me talk about numbers. Somebody wants to know, well, can you give us a little bit of statistic, a little bit of numbers? So these are a few numbers. Since 1948, the total amount of Muslim Arab deaths across the Middle East are 10 million. Don't believe me, go and find out these numbers yourself. 10 million dead. In Syria, it's almost, the moment it's 500,000, but it's up to about 1 million since then alone. The UK and US, the Iraq-Afghanistan war, death count, 330,000 civilians. Some of the militias as well, but 330,000 dead, right? Let's look at proportionate. Since 1948, the amount of Palestinians that have died, and please, I don't want to belittle this because every casualty is bad. It's not like I want to sit here and talk about death, so that's not my point. But proportionate, I want to talk about. The amount of Palestinians dead since 1948, in all the wars, in all the intifadas, amount to 40,000. So let's talk about proportionate genocide and war crimes. Clearly not the case. Israel has been noted in every one of its conflict, like for like, when the US or any other Western forces go into other areas for war crimes, like for like, Israel has been noted as the lowest civilian death count in any other comparable conflict. Lowest civilian death count. And the reason why it does this is because the high amount of technology that it uses. So when you're saying in Gaza, Israel is acting disproportionate because of snipers, the reason why it uses snipers and not rubber bullets as bows, rubber bullets cannot reach the 300-meter fence. There are armed Hamas members who are breaching the fence. If they breach the fence, they would go direct to communities to kill and slaughter, and there would be many more deaths. Then Israel would have to go in. The snipers are there to make sure that no one around is killed. Smart bombs are used to make sure that no one else is killed. The word disproportionate as a legal term under the UN Charter is very, very clear. You deal proportionally with the threat where it emanates, where it comes from. If there are civilian buildings that Hamas are shooting rockets from, then you're proportionate to blow that position up. That's proportionate. And when the civilian deaths are counted and Hamas drag the media to show them, look at what Israel's done, look at these deaths, look at the blood, that is not proportionate. Those deaths under UN law are the result of Hamas. So I want to show you, sorry, I'm not going to give away. I want to show you that the destabilizer and the blame for the Palestinian plight, which I have sympathy for the people of Palestine. I have sympathy for those Palestinian people who want communities, who want lives and want hope. But must be laid at the doorstep of the Palestinian leaders themselves. Take some responsibility for yourself. Don't blame Israel for your leadership. Your leadership is bad and rejected every single peace deal that's ever been given to you, whether you like it or not. Take some responsibility, and the surrounding Arab nations. Now let's go into a few facts. Many facts are in dispute, but these are not. These are undisputed facts. These are facts that the vast majority of historians would certainly agree. Number one, let's start off. Misconception number one. Due to Israel, the Palestinians haven't got a state. It is their responsibility. It's because of Israel there's no state. Let's just talk a brief amount of history. The word Palestine is a Greek word. Came in from the 5th century. And at the time, there were Jews, and it mentions Jews living in Palestine. It then moved on to the Ottoman Empire. And from the Ottoman Empire, we came to the British Mandate of Palestine. At the time, Zionism in 1886 started its movement as the liberation movement of the Jewish people. Right? The first time the Palestinian Arabs at the time, liberation, was 1964. The first liberation movement for the Palestinians was 1964 by the establishment of the PLO. Okay, that's number one. The liberation movement for the Jews and Zionists was preceded and predated, doesn't mean the Palestinians shouldn't have a state, but predated by many years. Okay. The term Palestine doesn't refer to just the Arabs. The term Palestine referred pre-1948, referred to the British Mandate of Palestine, both Jews and Arabs. There were Jewish Palestinians and there were Arab Palestinians. There was no single liberation movement of Arab Palestinians at the time, but there was of the Jewish people. In fact, it was famously in World War I, the Jewish Palestinian Brigade who fought alongside the British in World War I. Okay, so let's understand what Palestine is. It's a combination of Arabs that have lived in the area for many years. I mean, that's in dispute. I don't want to go into the time, but so have the Jews. Okay, let's move on. 1964, the PLO is established. Why is it established? This is pre-1967. The West Bank is what? The West Bank of Jordan. These Palestinians are living under the Jordanian regime. Gaza are living under Egypt. 1964, the PLO is established for one reason by Yasser Arafat, to eradicate the Jewish nation and to rid Israel, in their charter, have a look yourself, eradicate all of Israel. There was no West Bank, there was no occupied territories, there were no settlements, and the PLO came about. And ever since it became a terrorist organization. So, I'm not going to go into the rest of the history, you all know it. 5 major peace deals have been offered in 1948 to the local Palestinians, the Arabs living in Palestine, the partition. The Arabs rejected it. They said, you are not. The Jews accepted it, and they went straight to war with the Jews. Next peace deal, 1977. Later on with Egypt and Sadat, there was peace deals offered to the Palestinians, rejected it. 1993, Oslo Accords, peace deals, rejected. 2000, Ehud Barak offered the peace deal, rejected. And again in 1995, Olmert offered a peace deal to Abbas, rejected. Not a single one. Right, finally, Okay. Okay. I've got literally a few minutes, so what are we going to talk about here? Let's just talk about the refugees as the last point. Israel's blamed for the refugees of the Palestinians. I blame the Palestinians and the Arab nations around it. 750,000 refugees is the number that was used of Palestinian Arabs that were told by their own, and the reports are told by the Arabs, surrounding Arabs, we are going to war with Israel. We are going to take them out. Leave your homes. Get out of there. And they left. And they went to surrounding nations. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and other nations. None of those refugees were accepted by those nations and continue to be refugees today because of those nations. Let me give you the flip side. 800,000 Jews were kicked out. Just 8 years later, 1956, 800,000 Jews were kicked out of North Africa, Iraq, Iran, Syria. They came as refugees to Israel, and they are no longer refugees because they've settled in the land of Israel. Israel has absorbed its Jews as refugees. The Arab nations have not absorbed its plight of civilians as refugees. The final word I want to say is Israel is living in a unique situation. This unique situation is very easy for us in a debating hall to sit and discuss how Israel should act under fire, under constant threat. The extermination of Israel has been a threat since 1948, and everything that Hamas, Hezbollah, or any of the other Arab nations that attack Israel do is for that reason. Exterminate. You look at the Palestinian Liberation Organization flag, it's the whole of Israel. And the problem is that Israel needs to live with this on a daily basis. And how do you deal with it? You deal with the lowest amount of civilians. You continue to flourish as a nation. You continue as a democracy. And despite the disorder that's happening around you, you keep going forward and you succeed. Thank you very much.